Last week, we ran 2 Question Everything stories in a series about the reporting that's been going on at Brockton High School, and Kristina Rex, our WBZ reporter, led that work. And Kristina, congratulations. The pieces were great. What kind of response have you had?
Thank you. It's actually been a really positive response, which, often when we do stories that can be controversial, that's not always the case. But I heard a lot from parents, from teachers, from the district, and from some viewers that just really said, thank you for showing a more accurate and holistic view of what's going on.
Yeah.
As well as highlighting some of the good rather than like a grab you headline, which we've done well.
But the pieces were really balanced, which I thought was excellent. Starting a couple of months ago, for people who might not have seen some of our coverage, there were some really dire headlines coming out of Brockton High School about violence, about fights that had been recorded on Snapchat, for instance, and got up, made national headlines. It sounded like it was just an out of control melee in the halls of that school every day. So you decided to go to Brockton High School and spend 2 full days. First of all, in case anybody wonders, how do you know that the administration and the teachers and students didn't, clean up and make sure everything looked perfect for your arrival?
So that's like a natural concern, right? When we do something like this, when we get access to an environment that we wouldn't otherwise get access to, that is allegedly out of control. However, I did notice in my time there that other than the people we interviewed that were set up to be interviewed, none of the teachers or students had advance warning that we were going to be there. Everyone was surprised to see us in the halls, which made the entire experience feel a lot more natural. Like there's some moments in the stories, if you watch them, where I talked to some kids in the halls. Those are kids who saw the camera and they were like, who are you and what are you doing here?
Yeah. And their reactions were very natural.
Very natural, and I said to them right off the bat, do you think we're getting a real look at what a day is like here? And they said, yeah, I think so. Yeah, this is a pretty normal day for us.
Yeah, I think we forget sometimes, especially in our world, that when video lives on and gets played over and over and over, it gives the perception that something is a constant daily occurrence, when, that is simply not the case. When you talk to most kids, they said most of them hadn't even witnessed a fight in person, et cetera. But let's talk about some of the big challenges that you covered in your piece. One of the things that really stood out to me are these budget deficits. Did the headmaster or other teachers, people in the district, explain why those numbers appear to be getting worse, which has led to teacher layoffs?
So the why the budget is so bad was actually figured out by an audit that was done of the city and of the school district just recently. And the answer to that is really just mismanagement, just overspending, and things got more expensive. And the district didn't necessarily calculate for not having the amount of money it was spending. That is the one area where we identified there is really no exact solution in play yet.
Wow.
So this budget audit only came out a few weeks ago, and the district is now grappling with that and trying to figure out the very difficult situation here of how can we hire more people, which we desperately need, where we also need to be making budget cuts to account for a multi-million-dollar deficit that we have over the course of 3 years.
What about the Mass Department of Education? Are they going to help?
Unclear
about how that moves forward.
They have been in touch with the Brockton School District. I heard that from both Brockton and the Mass Department of Education. So there have been moments where the state has been in communication and overseeing what's going on in Brockton, but not so much as they're like stepping in.
Right.
That's not
one of the things that you pointed out in your reporting, and we could also see it in the hallways and the classrooms. This is a really big school, the biggest school.
Yeah, and that's part of this. So there's 3,700 kids who go to Brockton High right now, and that's actually down for them. The principal told me that they've lost about 800 kids in the last few years, and part of that, he feels, has been because their reputation has been going downhill. And so some kids or families have opted for charter schools or private schools. So they've actually lost enrollment. Still the biggest high school in Massachusetts by far. And that's actually a blessing and a curse. It's a curse for obvious reasons. It's really hard to manage that many kids, especially when you have staffing shortages. as far as the fights go, it can be a blessing because the school is so big. Whereas I've covered other schools where, like, if a fight breaks out, the whole school has to shelter in place. At Brockton High, it's so big that a fight breaks out, let's say in a corner of a hall, and it's squashed and handled by teachers before it even reverberates down the hall. The school is so big that most kids in it wouldn't even know something is happening until they saw it on social media later.
And they're broken up into 4 houses, right?
Yep. And so they have classes within houses, but their house, which is color coded, it's azure, red, green, and yellow. It's like their home base for the day.
Right,
so they have IDs, they have the color on it, and like that's where they're supposed to be at all free periods of the day.
You know, they have such a shortage of teachers. You covered the aspect of the story where something I think people were sort of appalled by was that if teachers are out for the day because they call in sick or whatever, they need the day off, there are some classes where kids just go sit in the cafeteria and they're not doing anything.
And it's interesting because we had heard about this, right? We had heard this concept of hundreds of kids in the cafeteria, running wild, which isn't what we saw, but the cafeteria thing is real. I've been very blessed. I grew up in Massachusetts, but I grew up in an area where there would always be a substitute teacher. If a teacher was absent. In Brockton, they're struggling so hard to find not just teachers full-time, but substitutes that every morning in morning announcements, a student reads a list called teacher absent without a sub. And that list is all the teachers for whom there are no replacements today. All those kids miss those classes and instead sit in the cafeteria and do homework supervised. So that can be anywhere from a dozen to a couple hundred kids at any given moment based on how many teachers are out sick.
Yeah, it just sounds like a bad idea.
Right.
And what else are they going to do if they don't have the bodies in the building?
Right. Absolutely. And they're missing out. They should be learning in those moments and they're not.
The other challenge they had was for part of the school year, the superintendent was sort of the acting principal, right? And now they have a new principal who you could see in your story was very engaged with the students.
It does seem, and again, we were there with the camera on, so I do feel that we got a pretty accurate representation, but it does seem like the kids love him. He's a big, tall guy, big personality, and like the kids gravitate towards him in the halls. Yeah. But that management or leadership shift over the course from last spring when their superintendent was he left on medical leave when this whole budget crisis happened. That time into the fall was a crazy turnover for Brockton. They have an acting superintendent who was also the principal. They then replaced a principal. They got a brand new principal and rearranged kind of all their administration. So that was happening during the school year. And as that teacher who I interviewed said, kids thrive on consistency, and consistency has not been there this year.
And as adults, we all have to remember this is coming off the last 4 years where talk about a lack of consistency. Some of these kids who are high schoolers now did not have a normal middle school experience. And during COVID, they were taking classes from home. Who knows, based on their elementary school or middle school, how they got back to class. Now you have these challenges. And I think, the general thinking now is we kept children out of school too long. In retrospect, it was a huge mistake. And we're going to pay the price for this as a culture, as a country. Did any of the kids tell you, did they talk to you about their frustrations about that? I mean, they just haven't had a sense of normalcy for years.
They talked about how that has made them more dependent on their phones. One of the kids, and I didn't get a chance to use this soundbite, we only had so much time, but he said to me, our generation has a reputation for always being on our phones. And it's true. We're always on our phones, but we also went to school over the course of a pandemic when we were learning online, and our phone was the only connection we had to any of our friends. And so that link between these fights and the phones and the video recording, it's all connected to being home for so long and being so dependent on your technology.
And probably not experiencing the right trajectory of maturity, right? To be ready for high school if you've been home and just learning on screens.
Right. And so I think the hope is that consistency starting now can move forward to hopefully help these kids in the future.
Right. Okay. We're going to take a break, Kristina. We're talking to Kristina Rex about her 2-part series at Brockton High School in our Question Everything series on WBZ. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with some of the solutions for the future coming up after this. We're continuing our conversation with WBZ's Kristina Rex about her series on Brockton High School. I want to get back to the issue of phones because you talked about how kids are on their cell phones all the time. I mean, it's hard. I mean, they apply for the, sign up for the SAT on their phone. Now, it's not always not school related. But this has become such an issue with videos and Snapchat, video of fights getting out. What is the school's approach moving forward?
So the school has ordered, they're in the process of ordering these Yonder pouches, YONDR. Or it's a brand. If you've ever been to like a comedy show or there's some concerts where you're not allowed to have your phone, there are these pouches that these venues will have that disable your phone. Right. So you put them in the pouch and it just looks like a fabric pouch, but at the end of the day, it disables your phone so that you're not able to use it until it's unlocked. And so the idea is that each kid will have an individual Yonder pouch. There's a proposed cell phone policy that the school's working through right now. When those come in, the kids will have to bring them to school every day. And in the process of checking into school, which you saw in our story, the metal detectors, the ID scans, the bag checks, the kids will also have to put their phone into the pouch in front of an administrator, which will disable it for the day. And whenever they're in class, they will not be able to access that phone. Which was
I do think it's hard for people our age and older that phones are even allowed in school.
Right.
Like you would think they would be banned, but everybody has one.
But at the end of the day, we're also living in a time in society where safety is not always, it's not always a safe place. And so parents want their kids to have phones so that God forbid anything were to happen, the kid can contact them. So this is kind of a compromise. The phone can still be there. It just can't be used in class.
In classroom. I also thought it was interesting. You talked to a teacher in one of your first piece who had been a student there not that long ago, like 6 or 7 years ago. She mentioned to you that she notices that some of the disciplinary actions that used to be taken have gone away. And she attributes that to a lot of the discipline problems at Brockton High.
And I think she also connected that, which again, we can only show so much in our story. She connected that to both COVID and staffing. So she said that it was so strict when she was there, like dress code, you wouldn't even be allowed to wear spaghetti straps, or an administrator would, you'd get in trouble. Part of that was that there were enough adults at all times to be enforcing dress codes like that. And so as she described it, she literally said there were a lot more teachers around. There were a lot more people around to enforce stricter codes. Then on the flip side, what the administrators told me is that part of that loosening up might not actually be intentional, but it is also that coming back from COVID. When you came back from years of remote learning, you almost had to soft launch into the strictness of high school again. You couldn't just, it didn't work for the kids to just show up and suddenly have a million rules. So it's almost been an easing in of the learning environment again, where those rules can be more strictly applied. But again, you need enough staff to actually apply them.
Right. Yeah. Again, this is one of the reverberations of COVID. I just think those middle school age kids didn't mature correctly and learn what they needed to be able to do for high school readiness. And that's a big step up, which is really hard. What surprised you the most based on what we had been hearing was going on in the school and what you saw? Were you like walking down the halls and thinking, well, this isn't as bad? Or did you think, wow, this is a lot of kids in the hallway all the time?
I thought, wow, this is a lot of kids. And the tension that I sensed that we really tried to convey in our story, and I hope we did, is that tension to avoid chaos in the halls is always there. At any given moment, a teacher is like, get in your classroom, show me your ID. Are you in your right colored house where you're supposed to be? Why are you roaming the hall? Why aren't you in class right now? If somebody's in the bathroom for too long, you see a teacher go in there and check. It's very strict, and there's a tension to make sure kids are not wandering or being where they aren't supposed to, because that's when violence breaks out, is when kids are kind of sneaking out from where they're supposed to be. And you can feel that in the hallways.
Oh yeah, I bet. Well, that kind of hypervigilance, we all know, around any adolescent is going to be met with resentment, pushback. They want a sense of control over their lives. But it was also really touching to hear the students that you talked to one-on-one who wanted you to know that it was a good school and they love it there, and they don't like the reputation that it's.
And they really wanted us to not just know that the reputation wasn't necessarily accurate, but also that there are so many amazing people doing so many amazing things. And I think we always knew that the fraction of kids causing violence was a pretty low number of the population in the school. And, there are repeat offenders. But those majority of kids who are not causing violence really wanted us to know. They said, oh, go look in the art building. You have to see all the paper planes we created in art class. Oh, you should go to this class. They're reading their poems today.
And
Just
their drama club just won the Massachusetts competition
States.
for
Yes.
drama. I was lucky enough to do those ION education stories for years. And one of them I did at Brockton High School was about their incredible multilingual program where they trained students who speak multiple languages to go work at Brockton High School and be interpreters. I mean, we know Massachusetts schools out of anywhere in the nation. There are teachers, there are staff members, people who, as you say, do incredible work every day. But sometimes the size and the budget problems can really get in the way. What were some of the other hopeful solutions moving forward for the school overall?
Well, one of the things that they're doing to address the wandering issue is they actually ordered 1,400 locks, brand new locks, which seems dramatic, but what they're going to do is be able to disable or lock up classrooms that are empty at any given point of the day so that kids don't have anywhere to wander, so that kids can be lingering in a classroom they're not supposed to be in. So that's like a physical security measure that's coming into play. That's really interesting. And then they're doing advanced training. They're hiring more security personnel. And it's an ongoing conversation. If you watch Brockton school committee meetings, and this was also, I just want to point out, part of our motivation for doing this story, school committee meetings in any town or city are often like Yelp reviews.
They're contentious.
Right. You're either really happy or you're really upset, and that's why you're there talking. Anybody who's just having an average time is probably not showing up to a school committee meeting to talk about it. But part of the conversation in those school committee meetings are like, okay, we have parents willing to volunteer in the schools. Can we create a way to allow that to happen? And just recently, they voted to give the superintendent the authority to basically look into that as an option.
Yeah, CBS has done stories about some schools around the country who have allowed parents to volunteer as those people who patrol in the hallway so that teachers aren't spending time saying, where's your ID? Why are you in the bathroom too long? It's parents that are there doing that. And that does provide a whole other element of discipline, which is an interesting theory.
Absolutely.
What did, some of the teachers say about the help they need?
I would say it was a mixed bag. You saw I spoke to some teachers on camera, others I spoke to in the halls, others I spoke to while they were in class. And some said, this is the most amazing class. These kids in my classroom are phenomenal. I teach these amazing students. Others, I talked to one man who was on cafeteria duty, and he just leaned over and he said, like, it has gotten worse in my years here. There's just a lack of respect for adults that he feels has evolved over kids in his time there. That has been a real challenge for him.
I think we could all say that overall.
Right. Everybody, right? Many adults can see that. He's retiring because he just feels like it's his time. He's also pretty close to retirement age.
That kind of formality has gone away, and kids are very casual.
Didn't you grow up calling everyone Mr. and Mrs.?
Yeah, always.
I did, and I still call my friends' parents Mr. and Mrs.
I was always shocked when a high school boy would have the nerve to call me Paula.
Right.
I didn't like it.
But it's a different era. It's a different
world.
Time. It's a different world, and that takes a lot of adjusting for adults and for kids. And at the end of the day, many teachers just said they just needed, if there were just more adults around, it would make a big difference.
And more adults letting them know how much they care and that they're invested in their future and they want them to do well. Sometimes I think kids, sorry, that's my timer going off. Sometimes I think kids assume adults just want to get them in trouble all the time. And teachers have a good way of conveying, no, I'm concerned about your future. And we have the first generation here where we really don't know what their future is going to look like 20 years from now. And I think that adds to the stress and anxiety. I really do.
Yep. And as that one teacher I interviewed said, these kids just need to see some teachers who stay and who say, I'm here because I want to be, and I'll be here for all 4 years of your high school experience.
True. Kristina Rex, outstanding work. Great job. And for anyone who hasn't been able to watch both part 1 and part 2 in this series about Brockton High School, you can watch it on WBZ.com. And I know we'll be seeing lots more great work from you. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Appreciate it.